Accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. Makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the blind blogger Maxwell, and this is the Accessibility Advantage. And I appreciate y'all joining me for another episode. And you can find me and my services and the podcast at theaccessibilityadvantage.com or on LinkedIn under Maxwell Ivy. That's IV as in Victor EY. And for my audio description today, I am a older white Caucasian male, large man with medium length, getting longer than I like it, brown hair, with more gray or white in it than I like to, with brown eyes, and I'm wearing a white button-down dress shirt with a black tie, sitting in a kitchen chair. In my bedroom, my background is blurred because there's nothing back there for y'all to look at. I have retinitis pigmentosa with Bardet-Biedl syndrome, and all I have is light perception, or what y'all would call functional vision. My pronouns are he and him. Again, the website is the accessibilityadvantage.com. So today, I'm honored to be joined by a very talented and well-educated woman, and I think she's going to bring a different spin to the whole accessibility talk because of her background. Her name is Dr. Corinne Auman, and she is a trailblazer in the field of aging and the founder of Choice Care Navigators, a company dedicated to helping families navigate the aging process. She is dedicated to fostering authentic living at any age. Her real passion is helping change the way we think about growing older and aging in general, which she has done very admirably in her groundbreaking book, Keenagers, where she challenges the way we think about aging, encourages us to think about 55 to 80 as extended middle age as opposed to old age. And the book has advice for life planning, not just financial planning. And the most important part I like about this book description is helps us deal with the problems of finding purpose in post-retirement life. And I am a big believer in purpose. It's one of the reasons that I encourage a lot of people with disabilities to start podcasts, because besides the potential for income or practical skills, it can give a person a reason to get out of bed in the morning. You can find my guest at CorinneAuman.com, and that's spelled AUMAN. Corinne, thank you so much for joining me on the Accessibility Advantage. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here too. And, so whenever I speak to somebody who advises others, who's a coach or a mentor or a consultant, I always wonder, did they get into this business because they had to navigate this for themselves or a family member? So is that how you became the navigator?
Yeah, I think that's how a lot of people get into this kind of role. It wasn't so much that I had to do it specifically, although I'm doing it now with my own parents. But I watched my mom and her sister navigate this journey with my grandparents. And that really started around 8th grade. And I watched them try to, figure these things out until my grandmother passed away when I was a junior in college. And I thought, boy, there really needs to be somebody who helps you with this stuff, who helps you think about it and plan for it and figure it out along the way, because I think most of us don't give it a lot of thought, and you don't know what you don't know until you're in that moment and you're trying to make decisions and you don't have all the information that you need in order to make good decisions for you and your loved one.
Right. And quite often you're forced to make decisions that are really not good decisions, but the best of multiple bad decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. While also being stressed, upset, your loved one is hurt or in the hospital. And so it's not a time when we're necessarily very clear-headed to make good decisions either.
Right. And often if it's left to the family to make these decisions or do the caretaking, that can lead to hurt feelings between family members.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yes, yes. So how did you go from, observing this and, as you say, now doing it? How did you go from that to becoming somebody who helps others do it?
Well, so the process, I went to grad school and got my degree. My degree's in developmental psychology, but my specialty area is adulthood and aging. And I started my actual business back in 2012 because all along I'd said, this is a good idea. People need help with this. And then started the company. The interesting thing for me is when I started, I thought I would really be helping 40-year-olds who were caring for 70-year-old parents. And that is really not what I do. What I do is help 65, 70-year-olds who are caring for their 95-year-old parents. And so my own perception of what older adulthood was like, who was caring for who, was really wrong. And that's kind of what led me to writing the book and trying to get people, including myself, to reframe how we think about growing older, what that is going to be like, when we think we're going to be quote unquote old, and what is that, and how is it different today than maybe it was than it was for previous generations? Because you always hear 50 is the new 40 or things like that, but it is really true that 65 and 70 today are not the 65 and 70 that your grandparents or your great-grandparents had. It's really quite different. And our stereotypes about aging just have not kept up with those changes. I think the example you gave about telling folks who have disabilities to start a podcast, I mean, that's an opportunity that previous generations never had. But because of technology, because of the changes, there's a real, sense of, oh, I can do this and I can do that. There's so many things that are available now that give people purpose and reasons to get out of bed that maybe weren't there in previous generations.
Right. And, many people who are aging live with the same challenges that somebody who's disabled would do. But but as I'm sure you're probably more aware of this than I am, most people who are aging will admit that their vision is getting worse, their hearing is declining, maybe their mental faculties are declining, and of course their body physically is getting older, but they will never call themselves disabled.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, I want to say two things. Number one, you said people who are aging. That is all of us, right?
Yes,
we are all aging.
I'll turn 60 in April, so yes, it is definitely all of us.
Well, and it's so interesting to me how we talk about aging like it's only something you do like later in life. When we're all aging, we'll be older at the end of this podcast than we were at the beginning. Kids are aging. We just talk about it differently. We say they're growing up instead of that they're aging. So it's happening to all of us all the time. It's not just something old people do. And but we talk about it that way.
Well, I love that you took the opportunity to go, the host is saying something I disagree with. I'm going to correct him here and help him be a better advocate going forward. So I appreciate you doing that. And you're right. We do talk about it differently depending on what age we are at and what age we are talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not correcting you. I'm expanding your vision of what aging means.
I said improving my ability to advocate. I agree that what you did was positive. You don't have to soothe my feelings on that. When do you feel like you had the change of seeing the possibilities of people living more fulfilling lives as they get older?
So that has been the great joy of running my company, and it's so interesting because it is a little bit of a paradox. I'm running this company where we help people when they are usually in a crisis around aging in some way, or around growing older in some way, or somebody has had a fall, or there's been a stroke, or something has happened, and now the family members are trying to navigate, healthcare and all these other things. But what that has really shown me is, number one, how resilient people are, how people have these health issues, have these things come up, their life changes, their abilities change, and how well people tend to bounce back if they have the right attitude about it, if they are positive about it. Now you can Debbie Downer yourself right into a downward spiral for sure. But
Yeah.
I've had so many clients over the years who had major life events, and even if they didn't come back to their previous abilities full, at the same level, they were able to reshape their life, reframe their outlook, and go, okay, now I'm going to do this, and this is how things have changed. But they adapt and they move forward, and that has been so good for me as an individual to look at and think, oh, there's a lot to look forward to here, even with the challenges. Because I think when we're younger, sometimes we look at people who are older or people who are disabled in some way, and we go, oh, I would never want to live like that. I don't even want to do that. Take me out back, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I've
And
heard
then,
that.
well, but then what happens is when it actually happens to you, you figure out how to move forward. We are incredibly resilient and able to overcome these things. And that actually means you've got a lot. There will be challenges. There's no doubt there's going to be challenges for all of us as we get older. But those challenges, in many ways, make life richer than if everything is just super easy and you never have to work hard or overcome any sort of stressor or challenge. And that's the thing that so many of my older adult clients have taught me.
Right. It's just like what they say about the comic Superman. Before kryptonite, it was boring.
Yeah, you got to have something to overcome. You got to have a challenge.
All right. So, at what age do you think people should start thinking about their own aging, and then what age should they start being concerned about the aging of their parents or grandparents? Since you're telling me you work with people much older than I expected.
you know, I think we should all be thinking about our own aging and our own aging experience from actually a very early age, in the sense that people should have their healthcare power of attorney and their financial power of attorney documents done really as soon as they turn 18. Because once you turn 18 and your parents aren't in charge anymore, you need to have in writing who you want in charge if you're not able to speak for yourself. Because that, if you don't have those things, it is not necessarily true that your parents are going to get a say so, or whoever you want to be in charge will be the one making the decision. So the moment, my son turned 18 last April, we had him at the lawyer's office doing the documents the next week, because I know that these are things. And I see so many people say, oh, I'll do that when it's time. The time is now. So it's not something, again, people think those documents are something older people do. Those are things that everybody should have, just period. I also think that, in terms of thinking about our loved ones, I really wish that this was just a conversation we all had on a regular basis. We are all aging, and it would be such a different experience if, instead of never talking about it, people regularly had conversations about, hey, this is happening, or this is changing, or here's the kind of care I want as I get older, or here's what I don't want. And not the blanket, don't ever put me in one of those places. Like actual real discussions about, here's the challenges I'm facing, here's the things I think are going to happen in the future, Here's how I'm planning for it. Here's what I want, what I don't want. That would be really miraculous to me if we just could regularly have honest conversations about, hey, we're all in this together and we're going to take care of each other, and here's how we're going to move forward, or here's our goals for how we're going to move forward. And when there's challenges to that, we will work together to overcome them. But I've met a few families who do really do that, but the vast majority of us don't.
Right, because we don't want to.
We want to just pretend like it's not happening.
We want to pretend it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen, and I'm just going to die warm in my bed and never need anyone's assistance for anything.
Or our parents are going to die warm in their bed, and we'll never have to do anything extraordinary in that area either.
Right. That is what everyone hopes for. There's a chapter in my book called "Hope is Not a Plan." Hope is not a plan.
No. My science health teacher in high school said that to every student she ever taught, that hope is not a method.
Right. I just kind of hope this all works out.
Yes. Yeah. So if a family is going to have these kinds of conversations, do you think it should be annual or once every 3 or 4 years, or it should be something that becomes so it becomes so natural that you maybe even do it without having to plan it?
Boy, wouldn't that be great if it was just kind of a naturally occurring all the time whenever we needed to. I think that will vary a little bit based on age, right? So maybe as we do get older, these are conversations maybe we need to start to have once a year, those kinds of things. When we are in our 30s, 40s, 50s, this might just be a conversation we have to have once a decade when we are revising those healthcare power of attorney or financial power of attorney documents, because and our living wills, right? Our documents that say, hey, here's the kind of extreme measures I would want to use to keep me alive, and here are the things that I don't want you to use or I don't want to do. I think that kind of stuff changes, right? When I'm 30, maybe I want everything. I want you to do everything you can to keep me here. But when I'm 75, maybe I don't feel the same way. And that will change as our health changes too, because as we face different challenges, we may feel differently about treatments and different things we want. So I think just depending on your age and your loved one's age, that would determine how frequently we need to have the conversations. Right now, I think most people just aren't having them. So any frequency is good.
Okay. All right. Well, that's very helpful. And, you mentioned we're all aging, and in the disability community, we're now starting to talk about the idea that at some point in our lives, everyone will become disabled. Mm-hmm. Whether they identify as having a disability or not.
Yep.
What are some of the things as far as the physical changes that people should be doing to prepare for their older loved ones more so than for themselves?
So physical, like changes to the house?
Yeah, like changes to the house,
Sure.
Changes to technology that they use, and
yeah. So I think everyone should be thinking about the house they live in and thinking about whether or not it is accessible. Universal design, accessible design is not just good for people with disabilities or people who are older. Everybody likes it, right? Everybody likes wide hallways and wide doorways that it's easy to get through, that a walker or a wheelchair can go through. Zero entry walkways so that you can get in your house without having to go upstairs. It's so interesting in my neighborhood. They just built 2 new houses. I live in an older neighborhood, but 2 new houses just got built, and they put them side by side, and they both have zero entry walkways, which you almost never see. So it's just a sidewalk that ramps up a little bit and goes in. And I looked at that and I thought, that's perfect, because anyone can move into that house. Anyone can, and I haven't seen the inside, so I don't know what the inside looks like, but
right.
These sorts of little things that many of us don't pay attention to until, we actually need it. So you want to think about, do I need to renovate my bathroom so that I could get a shower chair in there, or so that I can get a walker or a wheelchair in there? You want to think about those renovations before you actually need it, because you don't want to come home from a surgery or from being in the hospital and then also have to live through a bathroom renovation, while you're recovering. The time to do those things is well ahead, so that you can have what you need to stay at home as long as possible. Because that's what most people want. Most people, if you ask them, they'll say, I want to age in place, I want to stay in my home. And that is wonderful, but it takes some planning. If you're living in a 1930s bungalow, it's probably not age friendly or disability friendly unless you start to make some real changes to it to update it and make it so. And that's possible, but you got to do it before you need it.
And it's also very expensive.
It can be, yep, depending on the house.
Yeah, we live in a 70s era home in a mostly rural area outside of Houston, and we have a ramp coming in and out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that, and we have the grab bars in our bathrooms, but I would say that's about the extent, because it's an old home,
Mm-hmm.
And the people we rent from, I'm so happy with my rent that I'm not, if I actually needed other things, then we'd push for them. But since, it's not a necessity and we like our rent,
Yep.
And as you know, housing costs are going up all over the country. And that's especially challenging for people as they're growing older, because most people, their income is not going to go up as they get older.
Right. Absolutely. And that's another reason to be thinking about these things well before you need them. If you're thinking about the house you're going to age in and the changes that might come with that before you actually retire, then you make sure you're in the right place beforehand, or that you've done the renovations beforehand rather than waiting until after. And there are economic realities around that. There's no doubt. But again, if trying to do it while you still have an income, before you need it, things are only going to get more expensive in the future. Probably making those changes earlier makes it better.
Right. And as you say, we want to avoid having to do these things while we are under stress or
Mm-hmm.
in crisis of, as you mentioned, having to do something like that after you're returning from a surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I remember 2 years ago when my mom fell and broke her leg. Other than bringing in a medical hospital style bed, there really wasn't a lot that they could do for her in this house,
Mm-hmm.
because it was not planned for,
Right.
And by the time she recovered from her injury, it was not needed anymore. But one thing that I did realize recently is, last summer I went to Chicago with some friends, and while I was there, I had a pretty severe fall. And for the rest of the time that I was there, the people that I was with were very sure to make sure that I avoided any additional injuries. But what that did was make me more aware than I'd ever been before about the lack of ramps and other physical accommodations in buildings, which, as a blind person doing most of the stuff online, I just assumed that we had been making real progress in in-person accessibility, but I find out that that's not the case. So besides staying in their homes and addressing financial need and addressing a purpose later in life, is there anything people can be doing to plan for themselves or their family members as to how they're going to get around their community as they age?
So this is a great question. This is going to depend a lot based on where you live. Urban areas have different challenges than rural areas do. So, if you're living in a fairly rural area, the challenge tends to be that you have to drive, right? If you can't drive, then you really can't get anywhere. And in more rural areas, things like Uber and Lyft are much more scarce and or more expensive if they do come out to get you, to take you places. So that becomes the real challenge. In urban areas, you have more options in terms of rideshare type things, as well as public transportation. And most public transportation, buses and things, tend to be somewhat disability friendly, but not always.
Right.
The other thing in urban areas are things like sidewalks, particularly in older neighborhoods. You may have a sidewalk, but it's narrow, and maybe it's gotten lumpy over the years, or I love it when you've got a sidewalk and they've put, like the power line poles in the middle of the sidewalk. Or they've taken up half the sidewalk with it. And you're like, okay, I've got a sidewalk here, but you have to be very thin and not need any, wheelchair walker, stroller, anything to get down it because there's no space. So, I think there are challenges no matter where you live. It's really just a sense of what are those challenges and thinking about the future and how you may need to overcome them, because it's going to be different in every area you live in. If you're in, some urban areas in the newer parts, they are very, friendly, wide sidewalks, big, what do I want to say? Crosswalk things, with long timers, because
yes,
older folks and disabled folks can't necessarily get across really quickly. So we need a lot of time to do it. And so there are places where it's very friendly, and then there are places where it's just not.
Right. One thing that I have become aware of from friends of mine in other cities is a lot of the larger cities have what they would call paratransit, but those are generally only available within the main part of the city. So if you live out in a suburb, you may feel like you're in the city, but you're probably outside the boundaries of the paratransit opportunities.
Yeah, we have that where I live too. And yeah, it's only in the city. And not only that, but it has to be scheduled way in advance. So, you could get there. You can use it to go to the grocery store or to go to the doctor's office or things like that. But you can't call them today and expect to go today. You need to call them now for your appointment in 2 weeks, kind of thing.
Right. And of course, many people are now aware of the medical transit they can get from their healthcare providers if they're on a good healthcare plan, although a lot of people are in danger of losing their plans, and there may even be some pullback on some of the Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans. But with that, I don't know about your relatives, but on my plan, I have to request it 3 days in advance. Mm-hmm. And on the day of the trip, I can generally count on killing 2 to 4 hours waiting to leave, waiting to see my doctor, and waiting to come home.
Yeah. It's not quick and easy.
Right. So besides the logistical challenges, as people age, they're going to have these changes in their expectations as far as the time it's going to take.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of clients who use those the transportation provided through their health care, and that is one of their biggest complaints is that they're gonna wait to be taken, they're gonna wait to see their doctor, and then they're gonna wait to be picked up based on whenever that driver can get back.
Right, but see, I've figured out how to use that to my advantage. I like to sing, and for years I was afraid to sing in public, and over time I've gotten to where I'm comfortable with it. So now when I'm waiting, I sing and I entertain the people in the waiting room to the point that the last time I was at my eye doctor's office, one of his new office assistants said, "Aren't you the guy that sings?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the guy that sings, but y'all didn't keep me here long enough for me to sing this time."
You didn't keep me long enough to have me burst into song.
No, they didn't. But it was nice to know that they were hoping I would.
Yeah, that's great.
But we have to figure out ways to fill that time, and some people do it on their phones, and some people do it by having conversations. I like having conversations with people too, but sometimes there's just nobody else in the waiting room or nobody else on my side of it. So
right.
but but so could you maybe talk a little bit about a change and maybe it's in mindset or attitude as we grow older or as our relatives grow older, because it seems like you need to have more patience and try to instill more of it.
Yeah, the thing that I think is really interesting, we all have grown up in a age bias culture. Ageism is all around us. The kind of the youth worship, that young people are the most important or the most exciting. And so we're all biased. We're all ageist in some way. Even those of us who work with older adults and love it, we're all ageist. And to fight that, to try to deal with it, I really think we have to start with ourselves. So one of my phrases is fighting ageism is an inside job,
Okay.
because we really have to start in our own heads thinking about, why am I dreading getting older? Or when I see a gray hair or I see a new wrinkle, why does that bother me? Or if I'm thinking, I'm putting on my outfit in the morning and I'm thinking I'm too old to wear that. Where is that stuff coming from? Like who says why do I think that? And you know, anti-aging products and stuff is a trillion-dollar industry. So there's big money in making you worry about getting older and making you worry about your wrinkles and your gray hair and what may happen in the future, right? Like
Right.
fighting aging at every turn, which that is a fight we are all going to lose. You can't win the battle against aging because it's happening no matter what.
Yeah. As our local sportscaster Charlie Palillo likes to say, Father Time is undefeated.
Yes, yes. So I really think we have to look inside and start thinking about our own thought processes and questioning them, right? And questioning, why do I think that? So I'll give you a quick example. I'm 50 and I just recently got a notification that I now qualify for the Senior Olympics in my area.
Okay,
And
so what event are you entering?
well, so at first I was like, well, wait a minute now. I don't know. And then I thought, no, a teenager would embrace this. Like, okay, so I am looking over the list currently to figure out what kinds of events I'm gonna join and do. And it's gonna be bad. No matter what I do, it's probably not gonna go well. But that's fine. I think you've got to, instead of running away from it, instead of going, oh, I'm not old enough for the senior games, I'm not going to participate in that. Instead of that, I'm trying to turn towards it and say, no, this is great, let's go do this is going to be fun. And
Right.
there's good evidence. Dr. Becca Levy up at the Yale School of Public Health has done ageism research for years, and she shows very consistently that your outlook on aging really matters in terms of how long you will live. People who have a positive outlook on aging live on average 7.5 years longer than people who have a negative outlook. People who have a positive outlook walk faster, have less risk of cardiovascular disease, less risk of dementia, just all these things that are impacted based on whether or not you're looking forward to growing older or you're trying to deny it and run away from it at all costs. So that is my number one thing, like really trying to get people to, number one, recognize their own internalized ageism and start questioning it so that they can then, number two, see the benefits of having that positive outlook on their own aging experience.
Right. So now I want to share an experience with you. I started having gray hair when I was in high school,
Uh-huh.
and it was only on the right side. And I learned many years later that that was because of a head trauma, and that quite often, if you have physical trauma to the head, it will cause early onset gray. So, but at 15, 16 years old, I've got gray hair, and I complained to my dad about it.
Uh-huh.
And my dad goes, Maxie, the Ivy men either go gray or we go bald. So if I was you, I'd be thankful that you're going gray. And, and And the truth is, I only started dyeing my hair a few years ago because my stylist told me that it would fit better with my professional image she was trying to help me achieve. And then last year, we were at an event where we were teaching styling and grooming to other visually impaired people in Dallas. Thank you, Chelsea Nguyen of C Envision Image Consulting. Um, she cut my hair up there because we didn't have time to cut it down here. And she started looking at it. She was like, Max, I think the way your hair is changing, that we don't want to dye it anymore. So I never really had a dog in the fight other than I had an expert who was telling me what to do. So I did it.
Yeah.
Um, so I have another question that occurred to me while you were talking about ageism. And I hope this doesn't put you on the spot or offend you, but I just got to ask because I'm curious. And many times Max asks questions just because Max wants to know. So how do you feel about all these women in their 40s and 50s and 60s that are doing bikini photo shoots and people commenting on how they still look so great at that age?
Well, let's go with that phrase right there. You look so great at that age, right? Why can't we just look at people and go, you look great? And age actually really shouldn't have anything to do with it. If you want to give somebody that compliment, great. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with people coloring their hair. I still get highlights. I don't have people with doing different beauty treatments and things like that, because I understand that we live in an ageist society, and it is particularly harsh towards women as women get older. And so often women feel like to continue to be taken seriously in the workplace, in relationships, in the dating pool, they have to look a certain way, or they have to try to maintain a youthful look just because of the way society treats them. A friend of mine has let her hair go completely gray, and her first comment on it was, it's almost like I've become invisible, and that people don't even see her anymore. And she's about the same age as me. So there are reasons people do those things. And part of it is, I'm sure, personal in terms of wanting to seem fit and healthy and feel like you look attractive. But part of it too is the way the world treats you and reacts to you, both personally and professionally, if you don't try to maintain those things, if you don't try to look a certain way, things like that. And I think everybody should have their own journey. I want to live in a world where it's okay to do either one, where it's okay to, do things to make yourself feel beautiful. And I really hope that's why people do it, to make themselves feel beautiful. And it's okay to not do those things if you don't want to. Unfortunately, I feel like we still live in a world where there's a lot more pressure to do those things than there is not to. But in terms of saying to people, you look great for your age, I want us to just say to people, you look great, period. Right. Age has nothing to do with it.
Right. But we both know, even if they don't say it, they're probably thinking it when they're referring to somebody, that's in their 50s or 60s,
Yeah, maybe.
They're probably thinking it. But it sounds like that really doesn't come into your thinking, because your approach, as you mentioned with your tagline, is ageism is an inside job.
Mm-hmm. So fighting ageism is an inside job. You got to start with yourself. I mean, it's like I said, when I thought about the senior games, my first reaction was, oh no, I can't be old enough for that. And then I went, wait, why am I saying the thing I'm saying? And why wouldn't this be a positive thing rather than a negative?
Those are conversations that we all need to have with ourselves more often. Unfortunately, in our society, we don't get a lot of time to have deep internal conversations. Heck, we don't usually even get time to have actual conversations with actual people,
Yeah.
So, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and trying to help us understand the way we think about aging so that we can have a healthier approach to how we see our future selves, because we're all aging, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to, what thought would you like to leave the audience with as far as how they may be able uh, to change the way they think about aging, or may be able to better support their family members?
I think for yourself, start questioning why you think about aging the way you do, and whether or not who taught you those thoughts, and who's it benefiting for you to think that way, right?
Okay.
Who gets money or power or whatever it is from you thinking about your own aging in a negative way, and starting to question that, right? Starting to see that it doesn't have to be thought about in those ways. And in terms of your loved ones, trying to just have honest conversations about the fact that we are all growing older together, and that if you want to get the kind of care you want, if you want to live where you want to live as you get older, the best way to make that happen is to have conversations with your loved ones, and with your, financial planner, and with your all the people in your life, your lawyer, all these things. Though I think we avoid those conversations because of fear, but those actually should be reframed into empowering conversations, because the way to get what you want is to talk about it. And the way to not get what you want, or to have things go sideways and not well, is to bury your head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. So, empower your loved ones to have conversations and to have the very best older adulthood experience they can possibly have.
Well, thank you so much for, again, sharing all of your knowledge and trying to help us change the way we think about aging to something more positive. And y'all can find Corinne at Corinne Auman, and it's CORINNEAUMAN.com. Of course, it'll be in the description. And you should definitely check out her books, as well as her company, Choice Care Navigators. And before I close the show, y'all, I want to remind you that there are several people that support me in the podcast, and I'd appreciate it if you would check them out. It's blueberry.com, which is blueberry without the E's, provides the hosting to this podcast and to other podcasts hosted by people with disabilities for free. Podmatch.com, which is where I generally meet most all of my guests, is an AI-based platform to connect hosts and guests for more sustainable podcasts, where I'm also the advisor on accessibility at podmatch.com. And then lessannoyingcrm.com, which is a accessible CRM that, because of accessibility, is also a CRM people actually want to use. I do appreciate y'all spending some time with me today. I hope you'll check out the website, theaccessibilityadvantage.com, or Maxwell Ivy on LinkedIn, if you're wanting to explore making your website or your organization's online content more accessible. I do appreciate you spending your time with me, and I hope you'll join me next time. Until then, take care out there. This is the blind blogger, Maxwell Ivy. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is. Just focus on those dollar signs, 'cause accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities.
Item chooser menu. 1 2 items, end stream. End stream. End the stream. And alt set not end stream. Stream.